जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे रामा राम राम हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे। जय कृष्ण बलराम कृष्ण बलराम जय कृष्ण बलराम। जय गौरनिताय गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय। जय प्रहलाद नरसिंह जय प्रहलाद नरसिंह जय प्रहलाद नरसिंह। जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शतषि श्रीमद् डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की। इस्कॉन संस्थापक आचार्य जगत गुरु से द होल वर्ल्ड श्रील प्रभुपाद की। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text number 33. Asau gunamaihi bhavaihi, asau gunamair bhavaihi, bhuta sukshmendriya atmabihi, bhuta sukshmendriya atmabihi, swanirmiteshu निर्विष्टो स्वनिर्मितेषु निर्विष्टो भुङ्क्ते भूतेषु तद्गुणान् भुङ्क्ते भूतेषु तद्गुणान्। असौ गुणमैर्भावैः भूतसूक्ष्मेन्द्रियात्मभिः स्वनिर्मितेषु निर्विष्टो भुङ्क्ते भूतेषु तद्गुणान्। असौ गुणमैर्भावैर् भूतसूक्ष्मेन्द्रियात्मभिः स्वनिर्मितेषु निर्विष्टो भुङ्क्ते भूतेषु तद्गुणान्। असौ गुणमैर्भावैर् bhuta-sukshmendriyatmabhihi svanirmiteshu nirvishto bhunkte bhuteshu tadgunan. Asau, that Paramatma, Gunamaihi, influenced by the modes of nature, Bhavaihi, naturally, Bhuta, created, Sukshma, subtle, Indriya, senses, Atmabhihi, by the living beings, Swanirmiteshu, in his own creation, Nirvishtaha, entering, Bhunkte, causes to enjoy, Bhuteshu, in the living entities, Tadgunan, those modes of nature. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. The super soul enters into the bodies of the created beings who are influenced by the modes of material nature and causes them to enjoy the effects of these modes by the subtle mind. Please repeat this translation. The super soul enters into the bodies of the created beings who are influenced by the modes of material nature and causes them to enjoy the effects of these modes by the subtle mind. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There are 84 lakh species of living beings, beginning from the highest intellectual being Brahma down to the insignificant ant, and all of them are enjoying the material world according to the desires of the subtle mind and gross material body. The gross material body is based on the conditions of the subtle mind, and the senses are created according to the desire of the living being. The Lord, as Paramatma, helps the living being to get material happiness because the living being is helpless in all respects in obtaining what he desires. He proposes and the Lord disposes. In another sense, the living beings are parts and parcels of the Lord. They are therefore one with the Lord. In the Bhagavad-gita, the living beings in all varieties of bodies have been claimed by the Lord as His sons. The sufferings and enjoyments of the sons are indirectly the sufferings and enjoyments of the Father. Still, the Father is not in any way affected directly by the suffering and enjoyment of the sons. He is so kind that He constantly remains with the living being as Paramatma and always tries to convert the living being towards the real happiness. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarane. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gauravakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Asau Gunamair Bhavaihi Bhuta Sukshmendriyatmabhihi Swanirmiteshu Nirvishto Bhunkte Bhuteshu Tadgunan. So further continuing with Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 33. So the background of Srimad-Bhagavatam is that in the forest of Naimisharanya, the sages have assembled, they have gathered together for performing a 1,000-year sacrifice. And what is the purpose of this sacrifice? Glorification of the Supreme Lord, Vishnu. So all of them have gathered to glorify the Supreme Lord. And the leader of this gathering, actually there were 88,000 sages in the forest of Naimisharanya, gathered to glorify the Supreme Lord. And the leader of these sages, Shaunaka Rishi, is putting forward questions to the speaker of this Bhagavatam, that is Sutta Goswami. And this Sutta Goswami was previously present when the Bhagavatam was first spoken by Shukadev Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. So he had heard the Bhagavatam, and now he is here speaking the Bhagavatam to the 88,000 sages. And the 88,000 sages are headed by Shaunaka Rishi. So they asked 6 questions to him, and in reply to those 6 questions is the entire Srimad-Bhagavatam. So one by one, different philosophical aspects, the Supreme Lord, this material nature, the living entities, karma, kala, all these things are described, and lives of great devotees, all these things are described in great detail in Bhagavatam. So here, particularly, if you see, Bhagavatam is expressing the glorification of the Supreme Lord in one particular way. The entire Bhagavatam is nothing but the glorification of the Supreme Lord. And the way Bhagavatam proceeds, it gradually takes the reader to the 10th canto of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, where the Supreme Lord's most wonderful and sweet leelas, as the son of Mother Yashoda, as the son of Nanda Maharaj, as the friend of the gopis, and all these wonderful leelas are described. But these leelas of the Supreme Lord are such that they appear like those of an ordinary human being. It appears like that. Just like Krishna is stealing butter and Mother Yashoda is chastising him, and then he is not doing different kinds of naughty acts, and then Mother Yashoda is again chastising him, tying him to different places. All these things are happening. It appears from such descriptions that Krishna is another human being, and these are some childish activities. But then, these pastimes of the Supreme Lord are described in the 10th canto. Now, before we reach the 10th canto and we are able to relish these pastimes of the Lord, the Bhagavatam is preparing the reader in 9 cantos. Who is that son of Mother Yashoda? Who is that person? Do not mistake him to be an ordinary child. Do not take his activities to be some childish activities. So, in order to give us that conviction, in 9 cantos, Bhagavatam is describing the glories of that Supreme Lord, who is the son of Mother Yashoda. So, that is how the Bhagavatam proceeds. So, in this particular verse, another aspect, one specific glory of the Supreme Lord is described. That Supreme Lord Krishna, who appeared as the son of Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, he is the same super soul who has entered into the bodies of all created beings. So that is the glory of the Supreme Lord. So in this way, Bhagavatam is preparing us to get convinced that the son of Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj, he is Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of all causes. And when one is firmly established without any doubt, when there is firm conviction in his heart that the son of Mother Yashoda is the cause of all causes, he is the actual source of everything, then it is possible to relish the pastimes of Krishna as mentioned in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Until then, it is not possible. That is how Bhagavatam proceeds. So in this particular verse, the specific glorification of the Lord is mentioned, that the Supreme Lord, he enters into the bodies of all the created beings as a super soul, as Paramatma, and these living beings are influenced by the modes, 3 modes of material nature. And the Lord, as a super soul, he causes the living beings to enjoy the effects of these 3 modes of material nature by the subtle mind. So this is the glory of the Supreme Lord, how he conducts this creation, how all the activities of this creation are happening under his direction. So the Lord, as super soul, he enters into the bodies of all the living beings. And he is the one who causes the living entities to enjoy the effects of the modes by the subtle mind. So, this particular aspect of the Lord as super soul, as Paramatma, is such that the living entities who are in this material world, they want to enjoy this world in different ways. So, the Lord facilitates their enjoyment by sitting in the hearts of all living entities as super soul. And whatever one wants, whatever desires we have in our heart, the Lord fulfills all those desires. So he is responsible for our enjoyment. At the same time, he is also responsible for our suffering. So this is very much bewildering to the people of this world. People cannot conceive, they cannot connect suffering and God. But generally people consider God as a very benevolent person, very kind person, who is full of mercy. So how is it that God is responsible for our suffering? People cannot understand. So all these things are described in detail, that the Lord is not directly responsible for our enjoyment and suffering. He is the one who awards our suffering and enjoyment like a sanctioner. In other words, the Bhagavatam explains that nothing happens without the sanction of the Supreme Lord. This is the way the Bhagavatam has been composed by Vyasadeva, that every single aspect of this creation has a connection with the Supreme Lord. Nothing is disconnected from the Supreme Lord. So, that which is very close to our Shri Krishna Balaram ki jai. So, that which is very close to all our lives is our own enjoyment and suffering. Nothing is probably closer to us than our enjoyment and suffering, because all of us, we want enjoyment and we want to avoid suffering. So how is God connected to my enjoyment and suffering? This must be understood only from the pages of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, because in the other religions there is conception of God, but there is no proper explanation of what is the connection between God and my suffering. That is not explained in the other religious faiths. Although there is conception of God and God created the world, such conception is there, and people dutifully go to their respective places of worship and they have some connection with the Lord. When they are in trouble, they pray to the Lord for protection. So conception of God is there in all the religions, but only in the Vedic literature, what is the connection between my suffering and the Supreme Lord? That is explained in detail. Other scriptures, non-Vedic religions, they are unable to give such explanation. That is why there was one famous Greek philosopher, his name was Epicurus. Epicurus' famous question was, if God is all-powerful, then is he not able to stop suffering, or does he not want to stop suffering? That was his question. You say God is all-powerful. He was basically an atheistic person. So his idea was, he was a great thinker. He saw that there is so much suffering in this world. And he also saw that the society is believing that there is a Supreme Lord, there is God behind this creation. So his question was, if there is suffering, then what is God doing? He is not able to remove the suffering, or he does not want to remove the suffering. So if he is not able to remove suffering, then what kind of a God he is? He has no power. That was his argument. And if he does not want to remove suffering, what kind of a person he is? He is simply watching everybody suffering. And then further his argument was, he is able to remove suffering also, and he wants to remove suffering also, then why suffering is existing? That was his logic, Epicurus. So, Epicurus was not trained in the Vedic philosophy. So, our Vedic literatures explain that yes, God is responsible indirectly for our suffering and enjoyment. Krishna says in the Bhagavad-gita, Upadrishta Anumanta cha Bharta Bhokta Maheshwaraha. The Lord seated in the heart as super soul, he is the sanctioner of everything. But he is indirectly responsible. His role is to simply award the enjoyment and suffering of all of us as per our previous karma, previous activities. So in other words, we have lived a past life, many lives. Many times we have accepted different bodies as men, as women, as demigods, as animals, as plants, as deers. And in all these different species of life, we have performed activities, and the results of those past activities we are experiencing now in two ways, either enjoyment or suffering. So whenever we have some material enjoyment, we should know it is because of our previous punya. And whenever we undergo suffering, it is our own doing which is sanctioned by the Supreme Lord. This way, Vedic literatures are very clear that the Lord is not the cause of our suffering directly. Indirectly, he is responsible for our suffering. This is what the Vedic literatures want to convince us. So now then the question arises, why that the Lord is doing all these things? Because here it is explained that the super soul enters into the bodies of the created living beings who are influenced by the modes of material nature and causes them to enjoy the effects of these modes by the settlement. So why is he doing? Why does this creation exist in the first place? These are all fundamental philosophical questions which Prabhupada has answered in his books very nicely. So why does he do all these things? Because ultimately the Supreme Lord is interested in a relationship with all of us. He wants to enjoy with each one of us. Already the Supreme Lord is having unlimited number of associates in his spiritual world, and he has got unlimited number of associates who are engaged in his seva. But his nature is such that he wants to always expand his enjoyment, increase his enjoyment. He is never satisfied that way. He wants more and more and more living entities to engage in his service. So this creation is a chance for all living beings who are forgetful of the Lord to get connected to the Supreme Lord through devotional service. And for this, the Lord is seated as super soul, Paramatma, in the hearts of everyone. Why? Because the living entities are not ready to render service to the Lord. They are not yet ready. They have their own plans. So, to facilitate the material enjoyment of all the living entities, this entire creation exists, and there is a mechanism of punya and papa. You perform pious activity, you get pious results, and you perform impious activity, you suffer. So in this way, the Lord has set up a system, but He is seated in the heart as Paramatma, always waiting when the living entities will turn back to Him. For that, different arrangements are there in the material world by which the living entities slowly can come back to Him. And what are the four ways in which the living entities turn to the Supreme Lord? Because generally people are interested in their own enjoyment. But there are some instances when the living entities turn to the Supreme Lord. That is also mentioned by Krishna in the Bhagavad-gita. Four types of people Krishna mentions. Chaturvida bhajante maam, jana sukritino arjuna, arto jigyasur artharti jnani cha bharatarshava. When somebody is in trouble, he approaches me. When he is in need of money, he also approaches me. When somebody is inquisitive to know, he approaches me. And somebody is looking for the absolute truth, he also approaches me. In this way, the living entities start getting connected to Krishna. They begin their devotional service. And further, by association with pure devotees who are expert in the act of devotional service, they get further inspiration, and this way the living entities continue their journey. So this is why this entire creation exists. For the living entities to turn to the Supreme Lord. And for this purpose, the Supreme Lord has created this entire universe so that on one hand, we can fulfill our material propensities and also gradually turn to the Supreme Lord. Here, the specific problem is that in the Vedic civilization, there is regulated sense enjoyment. Everybody is interested in sense enjoyment in this world. So, Vedic culture regulates. That means there are rules and regulations while trying to enjoy one's senses. Do's and don'ts. In this way you can eat, this way you cannot eat. This way you can earn money, this way you cannot money. So, Vedic culture is full of rules and regulations. So, as long as one follows those rules and regulations of the Vedic civilization, then one is on the path towards approaching the Supreme Lord. In Kali Yuga, unfortunately, all this arrangement, mechanism of regulated sense enjoyment completely collapses. And Kali Yuga, it gets replaced by unrestricted sense gratification. There are no rules and regulations. People simply do whatever they want. If something gives me enjoyment, I can just go ahead and do it. I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to worry about whether it is papa or punya, there is sin or there is pious activity, there is a next life, I may have to suffer for it. All these things we don't have to worry. If now something is ready, is available for enjoyment, just go ahead and do it. Don't bother about next life, don't bother about previous life, don't bother about God, witness. All these things are simply disturbances for increasing our enjoyment. This is the modern world view. Now, when somebody takes such a view, then actually he doesn't become free from suffering. His suffering increases. That is why there is so much suffering in this world, in the modern civilization especially. Why? Because people are engaged in sense gratification in a sinful way, in a restricted way, unrestricted way. Previously, when Vedic culture was very much intact, people also used to enjoy their senses, but in a regulated way. So their suffering also was minimized, not so much. But because of unrestricted sense gratification today, people's life have become miserable. So in such a scenario, what happens when on one hand the living entities enjoy in an unrestricted way, and then they forget what they have done in the past, and then when too much suffering comes, then what happens? People turn to atheism. That is what happens. People turn to atheism. When there is too much suffering, where is the God? There is no God. If there is God, why there is so much suffering? Because forgetfulness is a very inherent nature of the living entities. We forget what we have done in the past. And then, when suffering comes, people blame God. Prabhupada gives that example during Second World War, Britain and Germany were in war with each other. So the wives and sisters and mothers of the German soldiers, they went to the church and offered prayers. My brother, my husband, my son should come back home. And then in Britain also, the wives and mothers and sisters of all the soldiers, they went and offered prayers in the church. And both these soldiers are fighting each other. So how they will come back? Some people came, some people did not come. So Prabhupada said at that time, many women, they took to atheism. They turned to atheism. This is how, because the world war is not a creation of the Supreme Lord. It is a creation of us human beings. But then when there is too much suffering, and then they turn to it. This is the danger of unrestricted sense gratification. So if people try to enjoy this world in an unrestricted way, then there is always danger of turning to atheism. Because unrestricted sense gratification gives rise to a lot of suffering. And the living entities cannot handle so much suffering. And finally they say there is no God. So therefore, the only way in which the people of the current civilization, they can be saved from this kind of a very difficult scenario is through the Sankirtana movement. Because people are no longer in a position to follow the rules and regulations of the Vedic culture and enjoy their senses in a restricted way. Perform punya, avoid papa karma, and then engage in material enjoyment. Nobody has that culture, nobody has that consciousness. So it is not possible for them. That culture is totally out. So the only way people can be saved from unrestricted sense gratification, which ultimately leads to atheism, is by propagation of Sankirtana movement. So simply by coming in touch with the Sankirtana movement, chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, taking prasadam, and reading these books written by Srila Prabhupada, simply by performing these simple devotional activities, people can be saved from the path of unrestricted sense enjoyment. And the beauty of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement is that not only one gets saved from unrestricted sense enjoyment, he gets a chance to engage in devotional service to the Supreme Lord and develop love of God and then get the highest perfection, which was not available even to the people of previous yugas. In the previous yugas, although Vedic culture was very strong, people were very pious and following the rules and regulations of the Vedas, this opportunity to develop love of Krishna through such simple means as chanting Hare Krishna mantra and taking prasadam was not available in the previous yugas. It is a specific mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that is the beauty of this Sankirtana movement. That is why it is said, Kalair dosha nidhe rajan, the ocean of faults. Ocean of fault means everywhere you turn your face, there is only one thing in Kali Yuga, unrestricted sense gratification. So Kalair dosha nidhe rajan, but asti eko mahan gunaha. There is one great quality even in this terrible scenario of unrestricted sense gratification. What is that? Kirtanad eva Krishnasya. This Sankirtana, Kirtan of Krishna, Kirtanad eva Krishnasya, what it leads to? Two things. Mukta Sangha, Param Vrajet. You become free from all this unwanted, unrestricted sense gratification, and Param Vrajet, one also achieves the highest state of consciousness, which is love of Krishna. This is a great gift of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Actually, if somebody deviates from the Vedic culture, strict Vedic culture, it is actually animal life. That life doesn't lead to real happiness. In the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says, Yashastra vidam utsrijya vartate kamakarataha. Anybody disregards the rules and regulations of the scriptures and acts independently, nacha sukham avapnoti. He neither achieves happiness in this life, nor in his next life he is going to have a proper destination. That is the way the material world is designed. So, in Kali Yuga, everybody is on the same page. Everybody is deviated from the Vedic culture. So the only way people can be saved and brought back to sanity and then given an opportunity to achieve the Supreme Lord is through propagation of Sankirtana movement. So Sankirtana compensates for all the faults of Kali Yuga and also gives us an opportunity to render devotional service and develop love of Krishna. In this way, we can achieve the highest possible consciousness and become happy in this life also and next life also. So we'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande.